The note from his king had been clear, and as Richard waited in the tavern, he wondered if this was a good idea or not. He had been happy to hear the king had become concerned with his family. The visit to see his grand-uncle at the wall had obviously meant a lot to him, and that he was now doing something to help his aunt and uncle was a good thing. But was this man really the right man to send? Surely they could think of someone better suited? He had thought of many different people he could send. The problem was that to do so would invite further problems. Would they be able to protect them? Could they really be trusted? Though he also wondered that about the man they were sending anyway. The king, though, had been adamant that this was the right man for the job. So despite his own concerns, and not without a little pride that the king was making such decisions, Richard had contacted the man and arranged for this meeting. As he considered the rest of his plans, he saw the man enter. He looked on as Alice led the man to his table, nodding to the girl as she quickly moved away before returning with a tankard full of ale which she placed on the table in front of his guest. "Anything else?" she asked softly. "No, Alice. That'll be all for now," he answered, and the girl went back to her place near the bar. Alice was one of his. He needed eyes and ears inside the establishment, and when he had suggested it with Tyrion, he had been surprised the man accepted so readily. But then again he got the impression the dwarf liked the game and considered this a move in it, one which he could counteract, so Elise was hired but kept at a distance from the rest of the staff. Not that it mattered. It wasn't them she was there to look at, and she had already told him of the room upstairs having a hidden passage behind it. "What did you bring me here for?" the hound asked. "I have a proposition for you." "If you want your cock sucked, ask Blondie over there," the hound said gruffly. "No, this is more a job I'd like to offer you, a well-paying job." "How well-paying?" "You'll be given 10,000 gold dragons up front and another 100,000 when it's completed. You'll also have access to another 10,000 to cover expenses." Richard said. "You want someone killed, hire a fucking assassin," the hound said, emptying his tankard. "You've killed men before," Richard said. "Aye, and I'll kill again, but I don't do it for coin. I don't want you to kill anyone. Well, not unless you have to." "It's the opposite, actually. I want you to protect someone." "Trust, you look like you can protect yourself just fine. But if we're to talk more, you better get Blondie to bring me more ale." Richard smiled and nodded to Alice to bring over another round of drinks. He'd been surprised that the hound had qualms about killing. He had assumed once he'd mentioned the coin, that would have been enough. Perhaps the man had more morality than he thought. If so, then the king had been right, and this could very well be the right man for the job. "You hungry?" Richard asked as the man polished off the second ale. "I could eat, but I won't. Not here." "Why not?" "The chicken's fucking vile," the hound said and grimaced. "Very well, shall we?" Richard said, standing up and motioning to the stairs. "Yeah, fine. You first, though." Richard nodded once again to Alice, who grabbed another 2 tankards of ale and led them up the stairs into the small room. She left the tankards on a table and quickly rushed to take up the space in the small passage. What Richard had to say here was not ready to be sent back to Tyrion just yet. Once he heard the little knock, he took one of the ales and handed the other to the hound. "I want you to go to Essos." "Fuck off." "Why, you have a problem with that?" "Fucking Essos." "You're damn right I have a problem. It's full of crazy fuckers." "You should fit in then right," Richard said with a snort, which did not go down well. "I'm not fucking crazy," the hound said angrily. I know that. A poor jape. I apologize," Richard said. And the hound looked at him and nodded. "What's in Essos?" "The Targaryen children." "I fucking told you, I'm not killing anyone, especially a child." The hound's voice rose angrily. "And I told you, I don't want you to. I want you to protect them. The girl especially." "What's so fucking precious about the girl?" "Nothing. But her brother showed some disturbing signs when younger. If he's showing them now or if they've gotten worse, then the girl will need protecting, maybe even from him. Richard said. 200,000, the hound said. I thought you said you weren't crazy. Richard said. I'm not. You want me to go to Essos, protect people the crown once dead. You're willing to offer 100. Make it 2 and I'll do it. Richard smirked. The king was right. He said it would cost them 200, and Richard had tried to keep the cost down. This whole adventure would in the end cost them God knows how much, but if it protected the king's family, who cared? Fine, but you leave by the end of the week. I've booked passage for you to Bravos. You'll be met there by one of my associates who'll direct you further. Speak fucking properly, the hound said, shaking his head, and Richard laughed. I'll need you to send me letters once you're with them. I'm not a fucking spy either. I know, and I don't want you to spy. Just let me know where you are and that they're all right. Can you do that? I can. But you try and fuck me over with my coin, and I'll fucking gut you. Oh, don't worry. I know that. You'll get your coin. Good, the hound said as he turned to leave. Sandor. What? He aided gruffly. Should anyone try to hurt them? Don't worry, Lon, with them. I'll fucking enjoy killing. Sandor said as he left. Richard smirked as the man left the room. He heard Alice knock once to let him know no one else heard. The hound was far cleverer than he'd given him credit for. They had only met a few times, and that had been over 10 years ago when the man had been but a boy. But he remembered him, something which should cause him worry. But it was the last line in the king's message which made certain that he had no need to fear. Sandor is loyal. Peter, 293 AC. Climbing the ladder had been all he had ever wanted ever since he was a ward in River Run. Each rung seemed so far away as he looked up at them, and yet he climbed them all one at a time, and now was so close he could almost reach the top. As a boy, he had simple ambitions, foolish, childish ambitions, dreams of red hair and bright blue eyes which blinded him to the universal truth that without position, without power, he was nothing. Finding that out had been a painful experience, and as he put his shirt on the scar he covered up was the proof of that. He looked down at the woman lying in the bed, her hair the wrong shade of red, her eyes a far duller blue, and thought that he deserved far better than the uglier sister. He schooled his contempt behind one of his more charming smiles, and as she caught him looking, he could see the love in her eyes. Thankfully, though she could not see the disgust in his. Peter, come back to bed, my love. I'm so wet for you, she said, trying to be seductive, and he did his best not to retch. Lysa, I can't. Your husband is expecting me. We need to be careful, my love. The words dripping off his tongue were like honey to her. I still want more pet hair. She set her eyes fluttering as she moved her hair and bared her breast. As do I, my sweet, more and more, but we must wait. He moved and closed his eyes while he kissed her, moving back quickly when she tried to grab a hold of him. We should just get rid of the old fool, then we could be together, Peter. We could be married and spend all our days just laying in bed and making love, Lysa said, and he sighed as he watched her drift off on another one of her unlikely dreams. It was never supposed to be Lysa. It was Cat, always Cat. And had Lysa not been a convenient stepping stone to where he needed to be, he'd have never bedded her. Try as he might, closing his eyes and bringing up the image of his sweet cat wasn't enough anymore to make him be able to perform with Lysa. Thankfully, there were advantages to being a brother owner. Eventually, Lysa came back down to earth with a bump, and he internally grimaced at the upcoming recriminations. Or, do you not love me anymore? Is that it? Is there someone else better? You remember what I told you about anyone else, don't you? Her hair disheveled now, and her eyes wild. My love, there is you, only you, forever you, he said as he kissed her while picturing her sister yet again. Oh, Peter, I knew it. I knew we were meant to be. All those years ago, I knew it. She tried to grab him again. My love, I must go. I shall try and accompany you on your return to the Vale. We could spend time together then. Oh yes, that would be wonderful, would it not? Just you and I with no one else around. It would be a dream, my love. A horrible, nightmarish dream, he thought as he left the room. After leaving the personal apartment he kept in Tower of the Hand, and thanking the Seven, he found the hidden passage to and from his room, though wishing he hadn't found it with Lysa right there beside him. Peter walked to the throne room to meet up with the Hand and the King, and to once again watch the dance. Jon Arryn had to do to keep Robert's temper in check. The man was nothing more than a big child, threatened to take away his toys, and he would rage and rage, give him what he wanted, and he was as docile as a babe. Something which Jon Arryn had figured out long ago, though events had conspired against him to create the problems they were now facing. Had Tywin Lannister only protected himself better, then they could have bled the old lion for years. The gold would have kept coming, and they could keep the king entertained. But ever since the White Lion had taken over, the flow of gold stopped coming their way. Instead, it was going north, going to Lannisport, going on ships and keeps, going anywhere but to them. For Peter, this created opportunities, and also a problem. The more he was relied upon, the more he could rise. But without the large quantities of coin coming in, there were far less chances to enrich himself. Brothels were fine, and his did far better than most. But what use was it being master of coin if you needed to beg, borrow, and steal just to keep the realm afloat? As he walked into the throne room, he looked to the king and his Hand, and the argument which had already started. If it wasn't for the short-sightedness of one and the stubbornness of the other, they'd have had roses to pluck, and Petyr would be the one growing strong. Your Grace, Lord Hand, Peter. Peter, Jon Arryn said with a soft smile. Littlefinger, Robert said without one. Perhaps you can explain to His Grace the situation, Peter. Lord Hand, His Grace believes that we don't need the Tyrell's gold, and he refuses to allow them to marry into his family. Jon Arryn said grumpily. A bunch of grasping roses. You think I'd allow any of them near my children after what they did in the rebellion? Robert said angrily. Of course, Your Grace, but we must think of the future. They're the richest house in the land, and with them tied to the crown, we'd find them a good friend, Peter said. I tied them to my house. After what they did, they tried to take my home. My home. No, they'll never marry into my line. I'll not have it. If they wanted their damn Rosarses on the throne, they should have fucking fought harder during the rebellion. I'll be damned if I'm giving them a crown now. Your Grace, without their coin, we're fucked, Jon Arryn said. And rather than the desired reaction from Robert, the king instead just burst out laughing. Things must be bad if old Jon here is cursing, but it matters not. My son will marry Ned's daughter, and that it, his, is the only blood I'll see on the throne with mine own. Robert said, Your Grace, there is perhaps another way, Peter said, and Jon Arryn looked at him confused. I met Lord Mace last night, and he suggested that perhaps they may be willing to settle for a second son. Peter said, and Jon smiled. Aye. He mentioned the same to me also. I think it could work. Did you both not hear me? I'll not reward traitors. Robert said, Your Grace, given Tommen's age, we could string the betrothal out, use the Tyrells until other sources of income became available. Peter said, Other sources? Robert said eagerly. I'm working on some things, Your Grace, but we need stability now. Peter replied, My boy is but a babe, but betrothals don't mean weddings. Do they and that old cunt Olenna should know that anyway? Robert laughed. Indeed, Your Grace, John Aaron said. Fine, offer them Tommen. But I meant what I said. They'll not get a marriage out of me. Robert said as he walked off. Insufferable man. John Aaron said as the king left the room. He is the king, my lord. Don't remind me. John Aaron said and chuckled. You really think the Withered Rose will go for this? I think they're desperate to be tied to the crown. My lord, we should make the offer anyway, Peter said. Aye, we should. What's that about other forms of income? I have a couple of ideas, my lord. Not exactly sure if they'll work, but we may be able to take some of the Lannister coin for ourselves. Taxes, John Aaron said doubtfully. Oh, I think we should be more direct than that, my lord, Peter said laughing. I shall leave it in your hands, Petyr. Any word on Varys? No, my lord, it's most strange. Perhaps we should consider a new master of whisperers. We'll give him some more time. If he's not back within the moon, then we replace him. Any ideas? Oh, one or two, my lord, Petyr said as he and John walked from the room, not noticing the little girl who stepped back into the shadows. Starfall 294 AC. Ashara. She sat with Illyria, her sister, and she had very quickly become as close as if they had grown up together, rather than having not known each other at all. Illyria was bright, beautiful, and smart. She was also far more careful than she had been around boys, though perhaps that was because she hadn't met the right one yet, for Ashara had perhaps been the same as her sister once. Perhaps it was simply Harrenhal which had changed her. She put down the sewing she was doing and got up and walked to the edge of the small terrace which overlooked the Torrentine. The river glowed in the sunlight. Its water shined, and as she looked at it, her eyes began to water. She quickly wiped them when she heard the sounds of laughter coming from the yard. I got you, Ned said loudly. You did? You're getting better. Am I really? Ned said, his voice full of doubt. Of course you are. Now come on. It's my turn, so watch out. Tree, Kragan said, and the giggles of her sister made her turn to her. It's good to hear him laugh so. Illyria said, Does he not laugh much, sister? No, I think he's lonely. Well, he has Cregan now, Ashara said. But for how long? Illyria jumped from her seat and stormed off. Ashara shook her head. Her sister was right. This was all just temporary. Once Arthur made contact with the king, she and Cregan would join him, most likely in Castle Rock, despite her brother's protestations. Cregan needed to be with the other side of his family too, and despite everything, Jaehaerys was a Stark as well as a Targaryen. For Arthur. Though the idea that Jaime Lannister was doing what he had failed to was something he was having difficulty bearing, when Ulrich had told them just some of what had happened while they were away, they had both been left stunned. The things Jaehaerys had accomplished had been astounding. He was truly his father's son, Arthur had said. When he had told them the boy was Jaime Lannister's squire, Arthur had almost lost control. It had taken both her and Ulrich to hold him back. Only the news that the boy had been raised as Ned Stark's bastard had managed to calm that particular storm, though it ignited a whole other one. What? He raised him as a bastard, the true king. Arthur raged. Arthur, he kept him alive, Ashara said. There's more to life than living ash. What of the Stark honor? What of their precious packs? Arthur said loudly. Arthur, quiet. Should someone hear? Don't defend him, Ash. Not you, Arthur said. I won't. I barely knew him, Arthur. That was the truth of it too. They had danced, and he tried to flirt, but it was clumsy, and his words were the words of a boy, when what Ashara had needed and eventually found was a man. Brandon was everything. Ned was not. Confident, brash, loud. He stole her heart the first moment she saw him and broke it the last. But he left her a part of himself, a part of him that was the best of them both. As she looked down at their son, she smiled. "My husband, my love, my heart, look at our boy," she whispered. Richard Lonmouth, 294 AC. It had been years since he had set foot on Driftmark, so many that he barely recognized the place. But the castle itself he knew well. He had been granted entry quick enough. Once they saw his willingness to hand over his weapons freely, they had been more than happy to allow him access, so now he waited for his time to see the Lord. While a part of him missed Lucerys, a part too was glad it was the son rather than the father he would be dealing with. Lucerys, while fiercely loyal to the Targaryens, was always more an Aerys man than a Rhaegar one. The old guard benefited more from Aerys madness, while the younger saw the looming disaster in the hope Rhaegar embodied. Montfort was someone he could deal with, though. Given how far they'd fallen, that alone would have been enough to make them eager to join the king. But for the Valyrians, the old ties ran much closer than that. "I do not know whether we are ready to build such alliances yet, sir," Jon said. "I understand, my king. With some, though, the longer you wait, the more put out they may be." "Explain yourself?" "My king, you are working with the Lannisters. I know the reasons why, and I believe you when you say they can be trusted. But to those who stayed loyal to your family, they are the enemy. They will always be the enemy." "We only make friends with our enemies, Sir Richard," Jon said, and Richard nodded. "True, my king, but I fear for some knowing that the Lannisters were aware for so much longer than they may cause problems." "Who, my king? Who would you intend to approach?" "Lord Derry, the Valyrians, and one or two individuals I know can be trusted." "Dorne?" "No, my king. I fear that Dorne would create problems of a different sort. Not with the right incentive." "Richard, very well, you may move how you see fit. As for Dorne, I have an idea," the king said. Once he left this place, he would be heading to look after the execution of that idea, but for now his job was here, and as the last petitioner before him finished, he stepped forward. "My lord, my name is Elaine, a humble trader. I come to you with a proposal." For the recognition to hit him, but when it did, the Lord smiled. "Indeed, perhaps we can discuss. This is a more private setting." "Arraign see our guest to my solar," Montfort said. He was led out of the hall and down a corridor into a small solar. The silver-haired bastard of Driftmark offered him a drink, which he took, and he sat waiting for Montfort to arrive. It didn't take long. The Lord arrived after having clearly rushed to the solar, his face flushed and slightly out of breath. "Is it you? Is it really you, Richard?" Montfort said as he closed the door behind him. "Aye, it is, my friend. It's been a long time." "That it has, Richard. We feared you dead." "I may have well been for a while, but I'm fine now." "Montfort, better than fine. I have a purpose." "Brother, who is this man?" Arraign asked. "This brother is Sir Richard Lonmouth, the Knight of Skulls and Kisses and former squire of Prince Rhaegar Targaryen." Arraign gave him the once-over before a small smile appeared on his face as he recognized him. He barely knew Arraign, having met him only a couple of times when he was but a boy, but he was glad to see the smile nonetheless. "What have you been up to, Richard? What were you doing all those years?" "Nothing. I lost myself after the Trident. It took a long time and the right reason to find myself again." I know how it feels, Richard, so what brought you back?" Montfort said curiously. "Before I tell you that, do you still adhere to your loyalties? To your words?" "We do." both brothers said together. "Then let me tell you about the boy I met," Richard said, laughing. When he finished, both brothers looked at him in shock. Arain quickly filled 2 glasses and handed one to his brother and emptied the other himself, before refilling another and handing it to Richard. "I met the boy brother during the tourney of Lannisport. Seemed like a good lad, though we fell out over Jaime Lannister," Arain said softly. "I don't understand it, Richard. Jaime Lannister? I don't understand," Montford said. "I don't either, Montford. All I know is the king said he's his most loyal man, given what he's already accomplished under him, and the mere fact that he was being raised a bastard before that, I find myself believing him. But he killed his grandfather, our king," Arain said. "He killed a madman. Aerys was far beyond help, and we all knew it. Had Rhaegar been a lesser man, he may have resorted to it himself. I know he thought about it, given how his mother was treated," Richard said. "If the king has the Westerlands and can bring the North along with loyal men, we could have a chance. Robert is not the man he was. We could do this, given time to prepare. We'll need more, though. The Reach," Montford said. "I've seen the king with the Tyrell girl, Montford. It's a match waiting to happen," Richard said, smiling. "The Westerlands, the North, the Reach. We could do this. We could actually do this," Montford said. "The ships," Arain said. "What, brother?" "Those huge fucking ships the Lannisters have. They could wipe any navy off the map," Arain said, laughing. "The ships the king designed," Richard said proudly. Arain filled the 3 glasses once again and handed one to Montford and Richard. "Fire and blood," Richard said. "Fire and blood," Montford and Arain repeated. Tyrion, 294 AC. Waking up earlier than usual, Tyrion had come face to face with what was starting to rival Ghost for the role of Tormentor-in-Chief. How the Black Cat had managed to make it into his locked room would, if he thought about it, give him nightmares. But waking to the cat standing on his table and looking at him was probably enough to do that already. When the cat was with his cousin, it was almost pleasant until you came close to it. When it was on, it never was. And as he looked at it, he silently prayed he'd leave his room without a scratch. Almost as soon as he moved, the hissing began. He could feel its eyes on him when he dressed. He moved quickly and went to leave the room, only for the cat to run across his feet, almost causing him to scream. He would swear later if anyone asked that the cat, as it ran up the hall, turned back and smirked at him. "Damn Jon Snow," he thought as he left his room. When he arrived at the hall, he found he was the only member of his family to be there. He quickly took his meal and sat down, looking forward to the burned bacon. Usually he'd only break his fast here if there were family doing likewise. If not, he'd take his meal in his sower. But this morning, after his encounter with the Black Cat, he felt far more comfortable in public. He ate at a leisurely pace, and was soon joined by his aunt, her husband, their children, Joy. And to his dismay, the Black Cat, who his cousin would no doubt be feeding at their table. A part of him wanted to just finish and go to his room, but he wouldn't be rude, so instead he looked challengingly at the cat, who thankfully ignored him. "Morning, Aunt Emmon." "Morning, Tyrion. You're up early," Jenna said. I had a visitor this morning," Tyrion said, looking at the cat. "I told you to lock your rooms." "I did. He still manages to get inside." Tyrion said, watching as Joy fed the cat some of her meal. "No, Balon. You know like toast," Joy said, giggling as the cat proved her wrong. At times like this, Tyrion wondered why the cat discomforted him so. There was something about it, though, something that was off. The cat was protective, almost like Ghost was, but where Ghost's size scared people off, the cat used its claws. That wasn't it, though. It was something else. The cat at times seemed far too intelligent. It seemed like it knew exactly what it was doing. As he was thinking this, The damn thing looked at him, and he had enough. He grabbed the last piece of bacon and made his way to his solar. Saying his goodbyes to his family as he did so, he was interrupted on his way to the solar, though, by the maester rushing towards him carrying a scroll. "My lord, a message for you from Lannisport," Kraylin said. Handing him the scroll with his uncle's seal on it, he quickly opened it and read it. Shocked, Dornish ships in the bay bearing the Martell's royal banner advise. Kevin, maester, send a message back to my uncle. Tell him I'm on my way," Tyrion said. He quickly called for Dara and sent the boy to fetch his aunt, before making his way to his guards to send one of them to fetch the captain of the household guard, and he began to wish he hadn't sent Adam away. Dorne hadn't attended anything in the Seven Kingdoms since not long after the rebellion, at least not officially. Prince Oberyn had attended a tourney which had left the Tyrell heir a cripple, but that had, as far as he knew, been the last time they'd even set foot in the kingdoms. As for the West itself, he knew that Oberyn had come to Casterly Rock with his sister many years before, but with what happened in King's Landing and their rumored involvement in it, the Martells had no love for the Lannisters. His mind raced as he walked to his solar. Why now, of all times, would they come? Was it because his brother was in the north? Was it because of their increased trade deals? Did the Dornish want to open up trading routes with them? While plausible, they were unlikely. He hated not knowing. To be in the dark was not a place he liked to be, especially when it came to a family whose most erratic member was well known for his use of poisons. As he continued to try and figure it out, his aunt and captain of the guards entered the room. He hadn't even heard either of them knock. "Tyrion, what's so important that you've taken me from breaking my fast?" Jenna said, annoyed. "It seems we have visitors, but please, one moment, Aunt." Carl, "I need you to arrange a company of men to escort me to Lannisport, a large company, and it needs to be done immediately. Also, I want extra guards on all the gates. No one is allowed access unless it's cleared with my aunt. Is that understood?" "It is, my lord. We shall be ready within the hour," Carl said and turned to leave. Tyrion, "What's going on? Has something happened? Is anyone hurt?" his aunt said, worried. No one's hurt, Aunt," Tyrion said, and was happy to see his aunt's relief. "Dorne has sent some ships to Lannisport, one bearing the royal banner." "What? Why would they?" Jenna asked, dumbfounded. "Exactly what I've been trying to figure out. I need to go to Lannisport, Aunt." "I leave the rock in your capable hands," Tyrion said, getting up from his seat. "Tyrion, be careful," Jenna said as he left the door. He smiled back at her and almost tripped over the damn black cat as it ran by him, a laughing Joy chasing it. "Balon, no run, walk," Joy said, giggling as she too ran by. Arthur, 294 AC. Arriving in Sunspear. Arthur had found himself caught up in another scheduled departure, one which delayed his own. Finding out that Oberyn was setting off for Lannisport had made him almost stow away on his ship, so worried was he for his king. It was only when he was checking out the ship itself that he began to think straight and remembered that Jaehaerys was in the north and wouldn't be back before he himself made it to the west. Still, it was strange and worrying that Oberyn had chosen now, of all times, to go west. He would need to keep an eye on his old friend once he got there. It took him almost 3 days to find the ship that was going there, the trade route, not one the Dornish used or cared for, and so it was a northern ship he found himself on, one with a very interesting name. The Western Wolf was unlike any ship he'd ever seen before. Larger, sleeker, much faster, and it had taken all his powers of persuasion to even be allowed on board. It seemed the ships didn't usually take passengers, and it was only him telling the man he was trying to make his sister's wedding that convinced him in the end. The thing which surprised him most, though, was how heavily armed the ship was. There were scorpions and crossbowmen everywhere. When he'd asked, the men just shrugged, saying the ship was too important to be unprotected. though, how any ship could even get close enough to worry. It was something he wondered, as within a week of sailing they passed the Dornish ships carrying Oberyn and left them behind. "Thought I'd find you here, Daemon," the large, rotund knight said to him. "How?" "I like the view, Sir Wylis," Arthur said, smiling at the man. He had considered going by his own name. It had been 10 years since anyone had heard of him after all, but in the end, Daemon Sand seemed a better choice. "Aye. It is a good one," Wylis said as they looked over the deck of the ship. The night sky was clear and the stars were reflecting off the water. "Your ship amazes me still, sir," Arthur said genuinely. "It's a fine ship, is it not, my brother? When he's at sea commands its brother, but the wolf is mine," Wylis said proudly. "A fine name. The Western Wolf, but you're from the north, are you not?" "I am Daemon and proud of it, but the ship's named after its designer, not I," Wylis said. "Jon Snow, the Western Wolf," Wylis smiled as he said the name. Arthur had to bite his tongue. This was the ship his brother told him about. This was what his king had designed. He looked around it again, and this time he was even more in awe of it. "I've heard of the lad. Didn't he do something with mines or something?" Arthur asked. "Aye, made the Lannisters even more gold," Wylis said, laughing. "Not bad for a bastard," Arthur said. "Jon Snow's as fine a lad as you're like to meet," Wylis said angrily. "I meant no offense, sir. There's nothing wrong with being born on the wrong side of the sheets," Arthur said. "Aye, true that, you would know too. It's a hard life, but that lad has done so much with his already," Wylis said fondly as he turned to leave. Arthur couldn't do anything but agree. When Orid told him of the things Jaehaerys had done, he smiled more truly than he had in years. To see Rhaegar's son achieve so much was more than he could have hoped for. When he told him that he had been squired to Jaime Lannister, though it had almost been too much for him, it had taken the rest of the story to stop him leaving for the Rock immediately. His uncle squired him to a man who broke his oath, a man who killed his king, Arthur said angrily. "It was better than the life he would have had, Arthur," Ulrich said. "How can you say that? How is it better? The boy is the king. Had things been different, he'd have grown up a prince with a loving family around him." "I was talking about the life he was leading before Jaime Lannister named him Squire." "What about it? Ned Stark raised him as his bastard son Arthur. He had really lost it then, Ned, Howland, Jaime. He didn't know which of them he was most angry at. He tried to think reasonably, rationally. Ashara had done her best to calm him down, but it had taken a long time for him to not blame himself. His king had been raised as a bastard, and he had been told he was fine. He was happy. There was no need for him to come home. Had it not been for Jaime Lannister, who knows what life Ned Stark had in mind for him, that alone was something he needed to get his head around. Jaime had taken Jaehaerys on as a squire. He had trained him well enough that the young boy had won not one but 2 tourneys and had managed to unhorse Edmure Tully in an honor duel. An honor duel, when he'd heard that he'd felt so proud of the boy, to hear he had called out the fishes for their duplicity, for their treason, that he'd fought for his father's and mother's honor. Whether it was the boy himself or the lessons Jaime Lannister had taught him, Arthur would find out soon enough, but the more he heard, the more eager he was to meet his king. He had deflated when he heard they had headed north, so he considered whether or not he should go and try to meet up with them there. But in the end, Ulrich had been the clearer thinker. What if he got there and missed them? What if they were traveling and he arrived just after they'd left? There was a chance he could make it in time and meet them, but if he didn't, then it would be moons before he caught up with them again. So in the end, he had reluctantly agreed, and it was to Lannisport rather than the north he'd go. "We'll pack our things, Cregan needs to meet his other kin. Ashara said. Ash, you can't. I need to go alone first. It may not be safe for you and Cregan. I need to see him and decide. Arthur said. You're not leaving us behind, Arthur. I know that, Ash. I wouldn't dare. But please wait until I'm certain, all right? Fine. I'll wait for now, Ashara said. He took one last look at the sky before heading down to the room he'd been given. It wasn't huge by any means, but compared to most cabins he'd stayed in on a ship, it was enormous, comfortable too, and within a short time of laying on the bed, he was asleep. When he woke the next morning, he felt the ship was motionless. He jumped up and threw some water on his face and quickly left the room. His sword was ready to be drawn at a moment's notice, and though not drawn, it would serve him well if needed. Something he found. It was not when he reached the deck and saw they were already docked in Lannisport. He saw Sir Wylis, who gave him a quick smile. Ah. You're up, Damon. I was about to send for you, but figured you'd wake when you did. When did we arrive? Early this morning. You ever been here before? No, Arthur lied. Well, I'd recommend the Golden Maiden. It's got some decent rooms and the food's good. Does a good northern ale, too. Wylis smirked. I thank you, sir, for the voyage and the company. Arthur stuck his hand out. It was a pleasure, Damon. Should you ever find yourself in White Harbor, you'd be more than welcome at the Merman's Court. Wylis said, shaking the offered hand. Arthur smiled at the man and left the ship. It took him almost an hour to find the tavern Wylis recommended, but when he did, he was glad for it. He broke his fast on a decent meal of eggs and bacon with a fresh lemon after it, before being shown to the room he'd taken. The price was a little expensive, but it was worth it, he supposed, placing his things in a small chest at the end of the bed. He decided he'd familiarize himself with the town and with the rock once more, but hearing a knock at the door, he went to answer it. It's been a long time, old friend, Richard Lonmouth said as he walked into the room. Hey, John Aaron, 294 AC. Every single time he heard news concerning Jaime Lannister or Jon Snow, it ended up with his ire being raised, and this was no different. Jaime Lannister marrying a heathen was something he would never in his wildest nightmares even contemplate. That a southern lord of his standing would marry a tree worshipper was beyond him. He had spent the day going over his books and seeing if there was a legal way to strip him of this wardenship. He had read up on other houses in the west to see if there was one who could take over, all to no avail. He knew it was a nonsense of an idea, and yet he'd wasted his day all because Jaime Lannister's pet bastard had somehow managed to get him to marry a damn northerner. He had even scheduled a meeting with the High Septon, only to find that not only was he married already in one faith, but he had sent word that he'd also be marrying in the Light of the Seven at a ceremony in Casterly Rock. The High Septon had been incredibly pleased by this turn of events, as no doubt he too worried about the loss of influence, or more likely, the loss of gold should the Lannisters turn from the light. For Jon, though it was incredibly annoying that there was nothing he could do about it, that rather than bring the heathens to the light, it seemed the reverse was happening. This had not been the plan. All those years of work, all the plans he made, and even after getting rid of the dragon and his northern whore, the damn wolves still caused him problems. To think it was a bastard wolf only made it worse. He picked his cup up and threw it against the wall, but watching it break didn't alleviate his frustration at all. My lord, is everything all right? Yes, it's fine. Send someone to clean this and get me the Master of Coin. Jon said. At once, my lord, the steward said as he left with the two guards Jon hadn't even noticed. He hadn't been this angry since he'd heard what Jon Snow and the Tyrell girl had done with their coin. Spending coin on the small folk was all well and good. Spending their coin, however, was not. He'd been almost apoplectic when he heard. It was only made worse when Jaime Lannister had done the same with his. He did what? A Apparently, he and the young Rose used the coin to buy food for the small folk in Flea Bottom, Petter said. They used my coin for this? John asked. Aye, my lord. And apparently Lord Jamie has given his winnings too. When he had told Robert the stupid fool had just laughed, just like Ned he is, the king had shouted happily. Gods, sometimes he wondered if he'd made a huge mistake with that boy. He still, to this day, had a blind spot over Ned Stark, one which it seemed had now extended to the bastard too. But then again, Robert could never face a hard truth, and even now, despite everything, had rewritten Lyanna Stark into the love of his life when the woman had wanted nothing to do with him. He could still remember the crying, pathetic mess that was Robert when she had told him she'd never marry him. It had taken him hours to fix that one in the fool's mind. She's just playing hard to get Robert. Don't you love the thrill of the chase? Oh, there was a time when he could convince Robert to jump when he said so, something that lately was becoming so much harder. You call for me, my lord? Petter said, entering the room, and John smiled warmly at his friend. I did, Petter. Did you hear the news of Jaime Lannister? I did, my lord. It's surprising, is it not? I heard her grace did not take it well at all. No, she did not, Petyr, John said, shuddering at his remembrance of the queen's rage. So how may I help, my lord? Petyr said, and John felt thankful that at least one person around here apart from himself seemed to understand things. Those plans you had in relation to the Landsiders, are they underway? They are ready to be my lord, should I proceed. Yes, hurt them, Petyr. Hurt them a lot. I will, my lord. We'll see the benefits quite soon, Petyr said, and got up to leave. John poured himself a glass of wine and drank it slowly. They needed coin, and these plans of Peter's would provide a lot of it. Once he fixed that problem, he could then begin to look into the others. Marjorie, 293 AC. AC. They had finally arrived, and as she got out of the wheelhouse, Marjorie couldn't stop the smile from appearing on her face. Highgarden was such a welcome sight. She rushed forward and embraced Willis, having not seen him for what felt like an age, and after doing so she did the same to Garland, who she had not expected to see. Welcome home, my sweet sister. May I introduce you to Lady Leonette Fossaway? Mother by the arm, and together they moved inside. It was rude, technically, but she saw the smile Garland gave her, and the relief on the Fossaways' faces, so she knew it was appreciated. Even her grandmother seemed to enjoy it, given the half-smile on her face as they walked. Afraid I was about to bite into an apple sweetling, Olenna said, smirking. No, grandmother. Afraid you were about to devour one, Marjorie said. And her grandmother laughed. When she got to her room, she jumped on her bed. She had enjoyed her time in the capital. She and John had done something incredible, something worthwhile. Yet despite that, it was her time spent with John that she thought most on. Seeing her brothers when she arrived home reminded her of the one not here, which in turn reminded her of John. How long would it be until she saw them both again? She wondered as she lay in her bed, drifting off to sleep. She couldn't help but think about when she would dance again. It was a few hours later that she woke up, and she was a mess, her hair tangled, the dress crumpled, and she looked embarrassingly at the pillow she had wrapped herself around and blushed at the dream she had woken from. She called for her handmaiden, and after changing and dressing, she was ready for the world once more. She headed for the hall, as it would soon be time for dinner. When she arrived, it seemed everyone was in a joyous mood. Marjorie, my dear, come, we have such wondrous news, her mother called, though given the look her grandmother was giving her, she didn't find it so wondrous. Yes, of course, Mama, she said, taking her seat. My dear, your brother Garland is to be wed to Lady Leonette, her mother said, her smile bright. Oh, Mother, that is wonderful. Brother, my lady, I am overjoyed for you both, Marjorie said, her own smile just as bright. I thank you, my lady, Leonette said, and Marjorie looked to see the girl's parents looking proudly at their daughter. She looked to her brother, who looked happier than she could ever remember him being. Willis, too, looked happy, though he was a little more reserved, and was that a little tinge of regret she saw. Her grandmother looked proud, too, though she looked more at Marjorie than Garland for some reason. The meal they shared was as good as she remembered, and the dessert was far better. Even though it was just family and not an announced betrothal, the meal was still extravagant, and at one point, seeing the waste, Marjorie felt guilty thinking of those back in King's Landing. Before the feelings could take shape, though her mother whispered in her ear, "There are some letters for you, sweetling." Maester Lomis dropped them off. "Letters from whom, mother?" Marjorie asked, her voice quiet, though full of excitement. "From the north, my dear." "The Hallery said?" And Marjorie smiled as she took them. There were 3 in all, 2 letters and a raven, one sealed with a rose, the other 2 sealed with a direwolf, and she had to resist the urge to charge back to her bedroom to read them. Instead, she carefully placed them in the pocket in her dress and waited an appropriate amount of time before asking to be excused. Once she left the hall, she hurried back to her room and almost impatiently sat while her handmaiden let down her hair and helped her from her dress. Bidding the girl good night, she grabbed the letters and jumped into the bed to read them, starting with the raven first. "Just Marjorie. We have arrived in the north safe and well, though I find myself missing your company greatly. I wish you could be here to see my homeland, but perhaps someday you'll allow me to take you to visit. Until then, I shall have to settle for the favor you gave me and know that I carry a piece of you with me always. Just John." She leaned over to her jewelry box and opened it, taking the small handkerchief out and placing the raven scroll carefully inside it, beside her other letters. Laying back on the bed, she wiped her face softly with the handkerchief before turning over to read her brother's letter. "My dearest sister, the north is well, it's cold. That's the first thing you should know. Very, very cold. It's also quite beautiful, though, in its own way. Not like Highgarden and the Reach, not as colorful but beautiful in its grays and darkness. John and I are enjoying it almost as much as Ghost is. The wolf seems happiest out of all of us to be back in the north. White Harbor is an incredible city, though, and the Manderleys are very friendly. We've made some new friends, and Lord Manderley's granddaughters do love to dance. I miss you all so very much, you especially, sister. I look forward to seeing you all soon. Love, Loris." Marjorie frowned at that. Why would Loris put that in about Lord Manderley's granddaughters? Did he dance with them? Did John? Would his birth not matter to the Lord of White Harbor? She began to think of all she knew of the Manderleys. John had helped them with trade, with ships. He was from the north, a son, even though a natural one, of their liege lord. Would that mean? Would that make up for? She couldn't think. She quickly opened up John's letter, her mind not helping her at all. "Just Marjorie, I hope this letter finds you well, and that our project in the capital is not causing you too much discomfort. I feel terrible that I've left it all in your hands, though I know of no one I could think of who could do it better. To be back in the north and to have the chance to visit my family. I wish it didn't need to be so. I wish I was free to travel to Highgarden to see your home, though perhaps it is the company more than the place I wish for most. Were you here with me then? Perhaps it is that which would make this journey more tolerable. Or was I there with you then? Perhaps I may not miss the north so. What I do know is that I miss you. I miss your smile and your laughter, and I miss our dances. So perhaps I know something after all. I look forward to seeing you when I return, and each day we travel, I know that return grows closer. Each morning when I wake, I look at the favor you gave me, and do the same each night. And though it's not the same as speaking to you, I find myself occasionally speaking to it as if you were here with me in its stead. Ghost misses you too, though he'd never say. But I know he misses the pats you give him on his head and the rubs he gets on his belly. Boris too, though he too remains silent. But I can tell he misses family, and you most of all. So remember, my lady, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, you are missed and thought about always. Just John. Marjorie felt the tears well up in her eyes and took the handkerchief to wipe them. She looked back down at the letter and felt herself smile. She read it once more and placed it among the others in her jewelry box and lay back down on her pillow, turning over to go to sleep. She whispered, I miss you too. Just John, old Nan. 293 AC. The crypt was cold and dark, and yet for Nan it was still the place she felt most comfortable. She walked among the statues and felt her sadness rise as she came to the three newest ones. Rickard's raised feelings that contradicted each other. She was sad. Her lord was gone, and yet he was, in some ways, the cause of things. His desire to be closer to the south, his wish to be more than he was, had in some ways led to what occurred. Had he heeded his children, then Brandon would be with the woman he wished for. And Lyanna, poor Lyanna. She moved to her statue and closed her eyes, picturing the girl as she really was, and not this poor imitation of her that the statue represented. It didn't show her as the horsewoman or the wild little thing she had been in life. It didn't depict her fighting with her own precious Walder. She had forbidden him to fight but could not refuse when it was Lyanna if her brothers refused her. Then Walder was always ready to step in. He'll be here soon, my lady, she said as she touched her hand to the statue before leaving the crypt. Making her way around the yard, she watched as the Greyjoy boy snuck out. No doubt off to Wintertown again. She shook her head in disappointment. What Ned was thinking was beyond her. An Ironborn here in these halls was bad enough, but to treat him as a ward was absolutely crazy. To see how he'd influenced young Robb was even worse. But then again, it had been a long time since a proper wolf resided in this castle. Entering the keep, she met her boy, and though all the rest looked at Walder with pity, she herself could not. He was her blood, and what difference did his words make? Kodor, Walder said happily when he saw her. Have you eating, Walder? Kodor, he said, nodding. Good. You need to get your bath ready? Hodor, she said, shaking his head. He said, shaking his head. Walder, you know it's time. Hodor, he said softly before walking away. Once upon a time, her boy could speak. He could talk and smile, and he could make her laugh with his japes back when the wolves roamed these halls and the pack was all that matters. She looked to the table to see Ned and his wife, and though in some ways they were the perfect lord and lady in others, they didn't belong here. In another life it would be Brandon and his beloved sitting up there. Perhaps then Ned and Catelyn would have been in a place more suited to them, a place where southern courtesies and northern steel would be far more suited than here in the wolf's den. John will be here tomorrow. Really, father? Sansa said happily. Aye, my love. That's what Aelin and Will said when Jory sent them back. Is Lady Dacey with them and Lady Lindsay? I'm so looking forward to the wedding, father, Sansa said while Arya and Bran looked on. I don't think so, Sansa. I believe they went back to Bear Island. Lady Catelyn said grumpily. But the wedding's still going ahead? Sansa asked worriedly. Aye, it is, my love, Ned said, and the lady grimaced. Nan looked at the children. None of them were wolves either, but they would be soon, she thought as she left the hall. She walked to the room she'd spent almost 70 years in. She was tired but excited, and though she wasn't in the humor to sleep, she felt the need to do so. The pup would be returning tomorrow, and the wolves would howl once more.